over the rainbow, where dreams are better than life. There's nobody to save. I sit alone with my head through the sky. Yes, I'm wondering, never asking why. I just see inside, see inside.
Hello, and welcome to the Mechanics of the Maya. And today we're going to look at the voices of Babel, and Babel it really is. Interesting thing. I guess it's one of the most fascinating things. I discovered that very early in my career. It was one of my favorite questions to ask people. Where does what you say, where does your voice come from? Where does it come from? Most people think that the way in which you frame what you're going to say is something that you organize in your mind. It really is. The assumption is that the way you say things is organized in the mind, and that is the way that you deliver it. But that isn't, in fact, the way in which it works. As a matter of fact, the way in which you speak is a mechanism of your throat center. And not only is it a way in which you speak, but it frames the way in which you express yourself. In other words, the way in which you express yourself is controlled by your throat, not your mind. Your voice comes from here. And the throat center is an incredible center. It really is. It is by far the most complex. It's obvious in the sense that it has the most gates. There are 11 gates coming out of the throat. And what is so interesting about the throat center, that despite the complexity of the variations, all these variations that emerge out of the throat, in its biological association, it's only associated basically to one thing, that is to the thyroid system, to the thyroid glands, the parathyroids. In other words, this is connected with metabolism. It is connected with the way in which the potential of manifestation, in this case verbal manifestation, the way in which this manifestation can take place. The throat is really the center. I often describe it as in the cliche of Rome, in that all roads lead there. Everything leads to the throat. And in one way or another, all life is trying to find its way through the throat. One of the most interesting things about what it is to be us, that is what it is to be a nine-centered being, is that the perfection of our process, that is unique differentiation, moves us towards the ability of being able to express unique outer authority. In other words, to be able to express our experiential wisdom through our unique voice. Now, think about something that's even more interesting than the fact that the way in which you frame what you conceptualize is controlled by your throat, but think about the fact of what happens to you when you meet another person. When you meet another person, the likelihood is, because the throat has 11 gates, most people have gate activations in the throat. Most people have their own combination of what is, in essence, their voice. And yet everything about human design is understanding that we are as much imprint as we are receptor. As a matter of fact, we're more receptor than we are imprint. We are open to all of these other possibilities of being conditioned to the way we speak. Imagine being conditioned by somebody else, that they change the way you express yourself because you end up speaking out of a different side of your mouth. It's one of the most extraordinary things. And it's something that you get to discover, particularly in relationships. If you're being dominated by somebody else's throat, you can only talk the way they talk. You can't talk any other way. And you can lose your own ability to be able to express yourself in a way that is correct for you because you're talking out of somebody else's throat. Oh, the throat is an amazing thing. And every single one of these 11 gates, have a unique way in which they express themselves. Now take a look at the Rave Mandala. When you take a look at the Rave Mandala, the first thing you'll notice about it is that the Rave Mandala is divided up into 4 quarters, into 4 parts. And there is a part that stretches from the 2nd hexagram on the bottom and it goes all the way around to the 7th hexagram on the other side. And there are 16 gates in that quarter of the wheel, and every single throat gate is in there. In other words, all of the gates of the throat, all of the gates of our expression verbally are all rooted in one zone of the mandala, and they're all rooted in the quarter of civilization. There is nothing more important to us than the way in which we communicate with each other. It's one of the things to understand about being a homogenized being. When you're a homogenized being, your inner and outer truth is all in your mind, which means that you cannot help yourself but lie. Lie to protect yourself, lie so that you don't put yourself in a situation that you don't know where that leads, lie to try to get yourself into a situation. Because you see, the moment that your mind is the inner authority making decisions, then the way it communicates with the other is always, always, always being vetted. It's always being checked. You're always making sure that you don't say something that you shouldn't say. But this is what communication is all about. You know, as a nine-center being, we have the possibility within us to be able to communicate purely to the other being. But you can only do that when your mind isn't involved. You can only do that when your mind isn't your inner authority, because then it's going to distort the way in which your outer authority is going to emerge. It's one of the keys to being us, is that the moment that you're really operating correctly as yourself, strategy and authority, slowly but surely you begin to express yourself in a way that is correct for you, and you find your voice. Now, I'm going to take you through one at a time, through each of these voices, just briefly so you have a sense of them. But please understand, that's a deconstruction. Most human beings are going to have variations. I have many gates that are active in the throat. You can notice that. You know, so many of us have a very synthesized voice. That is a voice that's made up of different qualities that emerge out of this throat. But for the purposes of this class, you know, I will just take you through to give you a feel for what they are like. And in doing so, one of the things that I want to do is that I want to take you along the bottom of the mandala and take you in a line as the throat gates emerge, and they begin with the 23rd gate. You know, the 23rd gate. The 23rd gate in the throat, pointed upwards towards the ajna, individual gate, and it says, I know or not. This is its voice. It can't express itself any other way. Please understand that. You know, so if you've got a kid in your house who happens to have the 23rd gate, you're going to hear them say, I know, until it drives you crazy. Not only that, you're going to hear them say, I know, when you know they don't know. But then again, that's another story. But the voice says, I know. Now think about what that's like. You don't have the 23rd gate. So you're not one of these people who says, I know. I say that. I have the 23rd gate. You don't have the 23rd gate, and you're with somebody who has the 23rd gate, and you say to them, I know. Do you? You see, everybody thinks it's all about the mind. It's not about the mind. This is a mechanism. Each of these aspects in the throat, they say things the way they say things. And that immediately sets a parameter in which we think that is a construct coming out of the mind. I know. It's not saying I know because it knows, necessarily. It says I know because when it opens its mouth, that's what comes out. Oh, are we trapped in the game? And if you start thinking that your I know is your I know, you know, it gets very funny. Anyway, let's move along. We go from the 23rd gate to the 8th gate. 8th gate, you know, this gate in the throat center pointed down towards the G center, also individual, pointed towards the first gate. And the 8th gate says, I know I can make a contribution, or not. That's what it says. It doesn't just simply say, I know. It's not the 23. It says, I know I can make a contribution. I know I can help. I know I can do this for you. I know I can. I know I can. I know I can. Even when it can't. Think about the 8th gate that says, I know I can do this for you, and that throat isn't connected to a motor. And here is somebody who says, I'll do it, but they won't necessarily do it. Here is somebody who says they want to do it, but they won't necessarily be able to do it. See, we have all these voices. And our voices control us. In the sense that the way we express ourselves determines the way we exist on this plane in relationship to everybody else around us. And the moment that you're saying to somebody, I know I can make a contribution, they're expecting it. He makes contributions, they say. It's what he's always saying. He's always saying he's ready to help. Let's ask him, whatever the case may be. It's not about their mind doing that. It's about every time they open up their mouth, the same formula comes out. We're all like that. We're all caught in the formula. All right, then we have the 20th gate, contemplation, This gate that sits there at the top of the integration system, this most individual of all constructs in the body graph. And it says, I know I am, or not. So it speaks about everything in its I am, everything about I know I am, and I know I am here now, what this is all about. And this is what it talks about, and this is what it expresses. And it can't do anything else but. And please notice with all of these the or not, because it's an on-off. Or not. You can make the contribution or not. You can be aware of who you are in the moment or not. This knowing of what's now or not. It's not a guarantee of anything. But the expression is something that is rigidly controlled. All right. Let's move away from individuality for a moment. Let's get to the 16th gate. Ooh, the 16th gate, the gate of enthusiasm, the gate that sits at the top of the channel of talent. Oh, that 16th gate, it says, I experiment or not. In essence, it's I identify or not. But that's its voice. It's a voice that says, I identify with this thing or that thing. It's a voice that says, I am ready to experiment or not. It's a logical voice. It's a logical voice. It's interesting when you look at the throat and you see the voices that are there, the logical voices, abstract voices, the individual voices, only one tribe. Each of them expressing different aspects of that circuitry. So if we move from the 20 to the 16, we get to the 35. We get to progress. We get to the other side of the body graph, the 16, that's sitting on the left side at the top there, the 35 sitting on the other side, on the right side at the top. And of course, the 35 being abstract. And the 35 saying, I experience or not. That is, I feel or not. This is a voice of expressing feelings, of expressing change, of expressing crisis, of expressing the human experiential way. We have unique voices. Unique. And you see, the incredible thing about it is that your unique voice establishes who you are in relationship to the other. Because how you express yourself is how you are recognized. That 35 that says, I experience or not. Or the 16 that says, I experiment or not. These are collective voices. And it means they're collective voices that are always in relationship to the other. The 35 will tell you about how it experienced or what it felt about its relationship to the other. The 16 will identify something in the pattern of that relationship. In other words, the voices operate within the mechanisms of the circuitries that they represent. When we go from the 35, we get to the 45. We get to the only voice that the tribe has, its only voice, and it says, I have or not. I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to do this, I have to do that. Or I don't have to do this, and I don't have to do that. And I have to have, or I don't have to have. I want you to understand something, how profound it is to be controlled by a voice. See, if you've got the 45th gate, you got a possessive voice. It's mine, possessive voice. And the having becomes so important, what they have, what they don't have, because this is what they're expressing. Think about it. When you hear yourself say, I have to have, your mind is going, oh, really? Oh, yeah? Okay, yeah, we have to have. It's your throat that's doing it. It's your throat that's setting the pattern itself. Everything follows from that. So think about who you are. You don't have the 45th gate. And all of a sudden you're talking about what you need to have or you don't have, or it's conditioned voice. We get so easily conditioned by the other being. And it's so easy to be conditioned the moment that you're not aware, the moment that you're not operating correctly, the moment that you're so easily subject to the conditioning forces that other people bring. And when your voice changes, you change. You're suddenly possessive. You're suddenly Mr. I or Mrs. I know, And that's not normally who you are, and people look at you and say, what happened to you? And you think about yourself and think that suddenly you know something that you didn't know before, but you don't really know it, you're just saying it. It can be vicious the way the throat is controlled by the other, let alone the other by the program. There's 11 gates. 11 gates in the throat out of the 64 gates in the wheel. Boy, you're going to get a lot of throat activations. All those planets passing through, the moon going through that part of the mandala, cranking open all the gates of the throat. Long-term transits into throat gates. Whoa, what an effect it has on the way in which people communicate with each other, and they don't even notice. See, most human beings think it's interchangeable to say, I think, I know, and I believe. I believe, I think, I know. It's all interchangeable to them. I know, I believe, I think. I think, I believe, I know. All that. This is the homogenized world. We're not like that. We're not. We have very, very specific values, each of us. And you see, when a human being is being conditioned and their voice is being switched from one thing to another, they don't think anything about it because they don't notice. Because they think they have all those voices, because they think they make them up in their mind. They think they decide in their mind whether they know or think or believe. What a joke. All right, let's take another step. We go to the 12. We complete the 4 individual gates in the throat. There are 4 gates of I know in the throat. 4 gates. There are 3 for the logic, 3 for the tribe, 3 for the abstract, 1 for the tribe. The most gates in the throat are individual. The 23, the 8, the 20, and now the 12 on the emotional side, and pointed down at the emotional system. And the 12th gate says, I know I can try or not. And it's basically, I know I can try to mutate or not. I know I can try to socialize or not. I know I can try to deal with the emotional system or not, whatever the case may be. But it's still this fundamental I know. See, if you're not individual, I know is not something that naturally belongs in your verbal expression. It is changing you as a person. And it's changing you as a person because, in fact, you're being conditioned to speak in a way that is not natural for you. And the result is that people are going to deal with you relative to the way in which you're expressing yourself. In other words, they're not communicating with you either. Now, if you go along the wheel, in the journey that we've taken, and you go from the 23 to the 12, they're all in a row. Every single one that I have just described to you, all of these voices, they're all in a row. And then there's a gap. Then there's a gap, and then we open up again with the 62nd gate, this metamorphic gate in the throat, logical gate pointed up towards the 17, the 62nd gate, the gate of detail, this gate of being able to express I think or not. I think or not. You know, this is the logical voice. I think, and it is the natural logical voice out of the 60-second gate, where the 23 says, I know or not. The 60-second gate says, I think or not. And when we move beyond the 62, we get to the 56, we go to the other side of the metamorphic process. The abstract side, the 56 gate, the wanderer, the gate that says, I believe or not. I think, I know, I believe. Now look, if you're sitting with somebody and they say, I believe, the way you think about what they're saying is conditioned by the way they introduce it. When you're sitting with somebody and they say, I know, the way you relate to them is relative to the way they're expressing themselves. When somebody says, I think, you deal with it from another point of view. You see, the reality is that the moment that you're expressing yourself, the moment you say, I think, it is naturally an opinion. The moment you say, I believe, it is naturally an idea. See, the moment that you express yourself through any of these throat gates, you establish who you are to the other. Is it really you? Are you talking? Well, you know, that's the whole point. It's really something to be aware of. All right, we get to the final two. We get to the 31. We get to the 31 and 33. These two throats below, in essence, the 62 and the 56. The 31, the logical gate in the throat, pointed downwards to the G. The gate of influence, the gate of I lead or not. This is the voice that says I lead or not. It's not the eighth gate that says I can make a contribution or not. I know I can make a contribution. This is I lead or not. And then we get to see that the way in which logic operates is that logic is, you know, I think, I experiment, and then I lead. You know? This is the logical process in the throat. These are the voices. When you get to the other side, when you get to the 33rd gate and you get to retreat, you get to the abstract process pointed down towards the 13th gate, this roll gate in the G center. And the 33rd gate says, I remember or not. I remember or not. You know, the logic is about the future. I lead or not. The abstract is about the past. I remember or not. Individuality is existential. I am ready. I know I'm ready to make a contribution now or not. Our voices. But you know, this is not a random selection panel. Look at your design. Look at your chart. Look at your throat. And look at the gates in your throat. And see your voices. And notice very, very clearly which voices aren't yours. Because when you hear them come out of your mouth, you know you're being conditioned. I mean, I don't have any abstract voices at all. And I'm very limited in the abstract that I have in my design. I am not somebody that says naturally, I believe. I don't. And on those rare occasions where I can hear that come out of my mouth, I just look around and see, who's doing that to me? You know, because that's not me. I'm not a believer, I'm a knower. You know, that's me. I've got 3 knowing voices. You know, that's the dominant expression. And the moment that I'm expressing myself in a way that is not natural to me, I'm not, I have to have or don't have. I'm not, I can make a contribution. I'm not things in the throat that would change my nature. Change my nature. See, to be unaware, to be homogenized, you are taken so far away from who you are. I mean, it's one of the main themes for me in sharing this with you today, is to show you levels of conditioning that are so profound that take you so far away from yourself, that are so obvious and simple on the surface, so you can see it. You know, the moment that you see the gates that you have in your throat, and the moment that you have enough attention to notice when you're speaking in keynotes that don't belong to you, you're going to have yourself a nice little epiphany, because you're going to realize, oh my goodness, other people speak through me. They take away my voice. They change who I am. They change the way I express things. They say things in a way that I am not really capable of dealing with. If you're saying I know and you're not designed to be a knower, you got a lot of problems. You're not going to be able to explain your knowing. You can't. It can be deeply embarrassing. Your voice, well, it belongs to you. See, when you look inside of the body graph and you look at its mysteries, you get to see there's so many ways in which we are conditioned. And you begin to grasp so obviously that it's not possible for the mind to be able to resolve this. It's not possible for the mind to be able to handle it, to be able to deal with it, to do anything with it. It's not possible. You just can't. The only thing that you can do is you can change everything. You change all the rules. You take the power away from the mind to make your decisions. And the moment you do that in your strategy and authority, you open up the possibility for your natural voice to emerge, because it will. When you're operating correctly, you're going to express yourself correctly. The advantage of any kind of knowledge is that the moment that you give your passenger consciousness the ingredients of the way in which things operate, as you move more and more correctly in your process, that very recognition changes the way in which you deal with the world. It just does. It allows you quickly to recognize the manipulative and conditioning forces that are around you. But your voice, you know, your voice is something that is sacred. Truly, it's sacred. It's your voice. And as I said, beware of the fact that it is a complexity that you have to deal with. You know, it's not just simply a matter of, you know, having one specific voice, some people will, you know, that you can really focus on. I have 3 individual voices. I have one logic collective voice. I have one abstract collective voice. So in essence, there are these 5 different strains that operate in the way in which I communicate. And I use each of them in different situations, but they're my voices. So each of the 5 voices represent, you know, I remember, you know, I have, I think the details, and then I have the 3 individual voices other than the 8. And I use them as I teach, but they're my voices. You know, I'm not speaking out of an alien frame that changes the value of what is inside in terms of the way in which the expression works. See, it's so funny that most people, in the way in which they communicate in the world, they're in fact cutting themselves off. They're cutting themselves off from the other. They're never really being seen for who they are, because they're not communicating based on what they are. So take a look. It's something to see. And something else just to keep in mind. If you have an undefined throat, and there are certainly enough people that do, it means that that throat of yours is under enormous pressure. The pressure is the pressure on when it is, you know, easy for you in that sense to be able to express yourself. You have to wait in that sense for definition. If you have an undefined throat, one of the most important things to understand about communicating is that you can never communicate first. It puts enormous pressure on the thyroid. And the moment you have all that pressure on the thyroid, you begin to have problems with your vehicle itself and with your health and well-being. the answer in the end, strategy and authority. It always is. But look at those voices and remember what voices are yours, and be clear about what voices aren't yours, and wait until you hear yourself speak with a voice that doesn't belong to you. That's a great lesson. Well, to all of you, you take care. Nice you participated. Until next time, bye for now.
I can do nothing but wait. I sit alone with my head through the sky. Yes, I'm wondering, and never asking why. I just see inside, see inside.